Okay, class, this is Unit 6, Cognition. This is 7B in your textbook. Most of the reading can be found on page 299 to 312. This is video 6 and 7. Or no, sorry, this is video 7 and 8. And most of the information that we're going to cover in this section talks about thinking and problem solving. Okay, so the big idea is, how do people think? Okay. Cognition is the mental activity associated with thinking, knowing, remembering, and communicating. We just talked a great deal about memory and how we memorize topics. But this unit's trying to figure out, really, how do we come up with answers to things? How do we know, yes, we have the memory of my name, but what is actually going on in different ways in which you can come up with my name? Cognitive psychologists study these activities, including the logical and sometimes illogical ways in which we create concepts, we solve problems, we make decisions, and we form judgments. So the big idea is kind of what we're going to look at is, how do we form mental images? What are concepts? What are different ways that we can problem solve? And how do we make decisions? We've already studied a cognitive psychologist, which was Jean Piaget, who tried to give a basic understanding of how kids come up with ideas, or child and infant come up with the different concepts. Which perspectives does this connect with the best? So again, this is tying us back to the cognitive perspective. And then, how does this section connect with memory? Well, once we have these memories or these ideas, now how do we actually use these memories in order to make decisions or to think about things? Okay, so this is kind of like the second step. The big idea is this is the layout. If I were to do a hierarchy, okay, cognition would be at the top, and then coming down would be mental images, problem solving, and decision making. These are the three areas in which we are going to study. Okay, and then coming down from mental images, we'll talk about concepts and prototypes. Problem solving, we'll talk about strategies for problem solving. We'll talk about how creativity can impact problem solving, and then we'll talk about different obstacles you can overcome with problem solving. And then there are some big ideas that influence your decision making. The way that ideas are framed can influence why you make a decision. Your initial gut or intuition, your belief that you have, whether or not you're overconfident, we talked about this before, can influence your decision. I know it, I know it, I know it. And then the last one is misusing heuristics can definitely impact your decision. Okay, so let's talk about mental images first. Mental images are mental representations that stand for an object or event and have picture-like quality. So if I asked you right now, okay, can you tell me your way to school? A lot of you all of a sudden will start mentally drawing or thinking about that way to school in your head. It helps us a lot of the time solve problems. Mental images help us every day. They help us find a car, plan your route home, and picture an outfit. Okay, when I was having you guys do maybe different strategies last week, where I was having you remember the peg word system. Okay, so one, bun, whatever the object was. A lot of the times you're using mental images to help you remember that or to retain that. Concepts is the idea. A lot of times they help simplify our world. We have classifications for items. Okay, concepts are mental grouping of similar objects, events, ideas, and people. Our world would be lost without the idea of concepts. And I like to think of concepts as like your schema or your file folder for this information. So if I said the word school, you have pretty much a concept of what that idea all is kind of involving. You think about teachers, students, but all revolves around this classification of an idea. If I start talking about Halloween, that's a concept. You have an idea of what now Halloween represents. Their ideas represented by a category. They can be defined by a formula or a personal experience. Okay, they are an important tool in problem solving. Okay, like I said, if you did not have a name or a title or a classification, our world would be really confusing in terms of how we use it. If you didn't know what a ball is, that it's round, that you can throw it. Okay, if we didn't have classifications for that, it would, again, be very confusing. Here's some examples. If I said the concept is technology, a bunch of different images can start popping into your head. Okay, an iPad, a computer, a laptop, They're mental grouping of similar objects, events, or ideas. There are a variety of concepts, but they share a similar theme. So the theme here is technology. Okay. Organization of concepts. A lot of the times we use hierarchies in which to organize concepts. So we have the big idea at the top, and then you can kind of pull down on different ideas of it. So the big idea here, the concept is dog, and then you have a lot of different images of what the dog could look like. It could be a pit bull, it could be a lab, it could be a Dalmatian, it could be, a poodle. We also, in order to organize concepts, we use definitions to help them. Okay, so if we said a four-legged animal that barks, now all of a sudden you have this idea, oh my gosh, that must be the concept of a dog. So not only do hierarchies help us organize, definitions help us organize, and then the last one is a prototype, which is a mental image for the concept. So following that concept idea, usually for a concept, we have a prototype, which is the best example of that concept. It's a mental image or a best example of the category. Okay. The closer an object is to match that prototype, the more likely you will be able to recognize that as an example of the concept. So here's the example. If I said the word bird to you, okay, most of you in your heads would probably picture something that's similar to a robin. That's the prototype for your bird. Okay, but remember, there's other things that fall under a bird. A penguin is also a bird. But for most of you, that's not your prototype in which you have for a bird. Okay, so most of us, when we think about it, it's easier for us if we see something that's similar to a robin to kind of classify it under that concept. All right. So a bird is a two-footed animal that has wings and feathers and hatches from an egg. People agree quicker with the robin as the prototype than a penguin because the robin is birdier, they say, or matches the prototype better. Okay, if I gave you guys an example of give me a prototype for technology, a lot of you would probably either pick something like an iPhone or a laptop for technology. All right, but remember, there's other, that's the prototype. But there's other concepts that fall under that, like the VCR. Many of you probably didn't pick a VCR or a tape for your prototype. Okay, so a prototype is the best example of that concept. Okay, so reflecting back on some of the topics that we've talked about before, let's connect this to Piaget. Okay, like I said, a schema is a way in which we organize information in our head. Okay, it's that file folder we talked about, and I think that is the best idea is your classification of a concept. Piaget also talked about how young kids assimilate. First, we try and put it in the original folder, and then eventually try and accommodate it and create its own image. Okay, well, I think the best thing then here is when you're looking at the different assimilation versus accommodation. Assimilation is when you link it to the old item. Okay, and I think that that's what a prototype helps you do. You try and link everything to the prototype. Okay, but eventually you have to accommodate and you have to create a new folder. And this is that where you're creating a new concept for that idea. Okay, which could be something like the accommodation factor. Okay, after we kind of just talked about the big idea of concept or mental images, the next big idea in the textbook, it talks about, now that you have this image in your head, how do you think and go about solving problems? Problem solving is the way of thinking and acting to reach a goal. It can involve certain methods to solve the goal. So the first thing when you're problem solving, probably in math class, is you have strategies in order to solve the problem. You're either going to do trial and error, you're going to use an algorithm, heuristics can help you, or insight sometimes kinds of pop into mind. Creativity can also impact whether or not you're able to solve a problem. Okay, I hear students say, well, I just don't understand it. I'm not creative. So that can definitely impact whether or not you can solve something. And the last time, sometimes there's obstacles that interfere with our ability to solve problems. So some things get in the way for us to understand how to solve it. Okay, so let's first talk about problem-solving strategies. Okay, there are 4 different strategies in terms of how to solve problems. When we are faced with a problem, we have a few options for figuring out the solution or the strategy. First one is trial and error. You're going to try every single example, on an experimental basis. Okay, so this would be kind of just you're trying it out. There's no rhyme or reason of how you're doing it. Okay, you're just going to not apply any necessarily step-by-step procedure. You're just going to go at it. Another one is an algorithm. An algorithm is problem solving, in which you follow a procedure or a formula. This is going to guarantee a correct outcome if applied correctly. Algorithms can take a really long time. You're going to try every single solution. Okay. Heuristics would be a simple, basic rules of shortcuts to solve the complex mental task. So you're going to use some sort of shortcut in order to figure it out. Okay, it doesn't guarantee a correct solution. Okay, and then the last one, sometimes there is no strategy. Sometimes I was thinking of a student the other day that they were trying to figure out, it was 6 sticks and they couldn't come up with the word that it was. Then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, halfway through my lecture, they shouted out what the word was. This is an example of insight. It just pops into mind. A sudden and often novel realization of the solution. I figured it out. It came out of nowhere. It's like a light bulb that pops on. Okay. It contrasts with the strategy-based solutions. So it kind of contrasts with the other ways of having a step-by-step procedure or trying something out. It just comes to you. All right, so let's kind of go through the different ways in which you could do this. So let's say my problem in my class is I don't know who's absent. Okay, I could do trial and error, which I guess who's missing. Okay, so I just start calling out randomly. Is Danielle there? Is Joy there? Okay, I could do an algorithm where I call every student's name, and that would take a long time. Okay, or I could use a heuristic point of view. Okay, I could think about who's always absent. Okay, that's a shortcut. Doesn't guarantee the right answer. Or I can count the missing seats. So I have 3 students that are absent, okay, and those are the seats in which they sit in usually. Okay, so I'm going to assume that they are absent. Problem with that is students can change seats. Okay, so heuristic is like the shortcut. Algorithm is where you're going to try every single person's name, go alphabetical order, and then trial and error is just you're selecting, kind of shouting out at random. Okay, which is going to give you the best answer, the algorithm. All right, the next thing that it talks about with trying to figure out problem solving after strategies is how creative you are. Creativity is the ability to produce ideas that are both novel and valuable. Okay, there's 2 different types of thinkers that are out there. Okay, there's convergent thinkers, which we'll talk about. They prefer a single correct answer on something. Okay, so if I gave them an example like, what would you like for lunch? Okay, divergent thinkers may think up a couple different answers. Like, I would like macaroni with bacon, and I would like it with different types of cheese. They would like to kind of think outside the box. Convergent thinkers would say, give me 2 options and I'll select one. All right, so convergent thinkers they want a single correct answer. A lot of the times this is used for IQ testing. They're good at IQ testing. They can figure out the right answer. And it's mostly processed in the left parietal lobe. Divergent thinkers, okay, you like to think of a lot of different answers. All right, you like multiple answers. You think outside the box. And a lot of the time, this is processed in the frontal lobe. Okay, another thing that impacts creativity, not only are you a convergent or divergent thinker, okay, how much expertise or knowledge you have in the area can help you solve a problem. If you're really good at math and you have a lot of knowledge, it's probably going to be easier for you to solve the problem. Are you imaginative? You recognize patterns or making connections? Are you adventuresome personality? You like to try something new? Are you intrinsic? Are you maybe driven by an interest? You're really into art and photography, and you're driven to make the best picture. Okay, and then also a creative environment can definitely foster you to solve a problem. So a teacher that's more allowing you to try something new, more allowing you to figure out outside the box, you may be more prone to maybe come up with your own solutions. Okay, so we talked about, we're still on problem solving, so we talked about strategies, we talked about creativity. Now here are some obstacles to solving problems. Sometimes you have what's in your way is confirmation bias, and sometimes you have fixations, which can impact whether or not you can solve a problem. First one is confirmation bias, which is the tendency to search for information that supports our idea and ignore the evidence for the other ones. So you're so stricken that your idea is the right way that you're only supporting your answer in terms of why it's right. Okay, so multiple choice answers, it could be right for this answer, and you only search for support that defends your argument. When I have students maybe get multiple choice questions wrong, okay, and they're like, let's say they had, they selected answer A, well, they're going to do everything in their power to answer A or defend A, and not look at maybe any of the other statements and defend them because they believe that their information is correct. They have a confirmation bias. Okay, another one that you could have is a fixation. There's two different types of fixations here. You could have a functional fixedness, or you could, the mental set could also impact a fixation. So a fixation is the inability to see a problem from a new perspective. So you have that idea that your answer is correct. This is the way in which you're going to, you have your confirmation bias, and now you have a fixation with them. Okay, functional fixedness is the inability to perceive a new use for an object, okay, and associate it with a different purpose. So if I gave you guys a pencil and I said, figure out ways to use the pencil, most of you guys would be so fixated on the fact that it's a pencil and you need it for writing that you wouldn't try and find another way in which you can use this tool. Like maybe you're going to use this tool as a nail, and you're going to take a hammer and you're going to use it to help you hang pictures. Okay, that's kind of bizarre, but you could become creative and try and find another way to use it. But a lot of you guys are so fixed that a spoon is a spoon. You can't use a spoon other than just maybe using it for soup, okay, or for using it for something like a liquid substance. Could you use spoons for something else? Well, I use spoons for a game. Okay, it's known as something that resembles a piece to a game. Mental set. A lot of the times when we approach a new problem, we return to the original way we solved a previous problem that was similar. Okay, so an example I could give you on this one is if you see the letters O, T, T, F, F. Take a minute, maybe pause it, and try and come up with the letters, the next three letters that come up in this statement. Okay? So the letters that would come up in this statement are S, S, E. So what the little puzzle was 1, O, T, 2, 3, T, 4, F, 5, F, 6, S, 7, S, 8, E. Okay? So now take a look at the next set of letters. J, F, M, A. Try and see if you could solve that one. Maybe pause it. Okay, I bet a lot of you tried to figure out J. What number is that? You tried to figure out, now that you know the answer, you tried to return to the same way to figure out that solution. Okay, well, let me give you what the letters actually are. M, J, J. Okay, so January, February, March, April, May, June, July. All right, but maybe some of you didn't get it. You couldn't solve that problem because you had such a mental set on how you were supposed to go and solve that problem. Okay, so now that you're kind of getting an idea of how to solve a problem, now you have to make a decision. And there's different obstacles or problems with making decisions. You can misuse some of the heuristics, some of the shortcuts that we talked about. Intuition is going to impact your decision. Whether or not you have a strong belief in something, that could impact your decision. Being overconfident, I really know the answer, that can impact your decision. And last but not least, framing, the way they set it up, can impact your decision. Okay, so let's talk about first representative heuristics. In the book, it talks about, if I told you a story, a stranger tells you about a person who is short, slim, and likes to read poetry. and then asks you to guess whether this person is more likely to be a professor of a classic Ivy League university or a truck driver. Which would be the better guess? Okay, so you have the characteristics of short, slim, and likes to read poetry. Would you say that's a professor of an Ivy League school or a truck driver? Okay, so first let's figure out how many. So most of you guys would probably, if you had to think about this, most of you guys would probably select the Ivy League professor. All right, but let's figure out if this could really be the situation. Okay, let's first figure out how many professors fit the description. How many Ivy League universities do you suppose there are? Oh, about 10, I suppose. Okay. How many classic professors would you guess there are at each? Maybe 4 for classic classic professors. Okay, so there's 40 Ivy League classic professors. What fractions of these are short film? Let's say half. So maybe there's 20 that like to read poetry. I'd say half of, and how many like to read poetry? I'd say half of that. So we got 10 professors we're down to now. Okay, now let's figure out how many truck drivers fit this description. How many truck drivers do you suppose there are out there? Okay, maybe 400,000. What fraction of them are short and slim? Not many, but let's say 1 in 8. Of these, let's say that's about 50,000. What percentage of them like to read poetry? Truck drivers who like poetry, maybe 1 in 100. Oh, okay, I get it. That leaves 500 short, slim poetry drivers that are out there. Okay, yep. Even if we accept our stereotype, that description is more representative of classic professors than of truck drivers. The odds are in 50 to 1 that the person is a truck driver. So when you actually take a look at what they represent, you're going to probably find more, you had a representative idea of who that stereotype was. Right? But when you actually look at the numbers of who it actually can be, you probably find out that the truck driver is probably more prone to be the answer to that. But we have kind of like this idea, this representation of what we think, and that can skew whether or not we can make a decision. Okay, so that's representative. Okay, so the representative heuristic influences many of our daily decisions. To judge the likelihood of something, we intuitively compare it to our mental representation of the category, or say what truck drivers are like. Okay, truck drivers don't like the fact that they probably read poetry and are short and slim, and it's more prone that the university professor is more fitting those qualities, so you might be more prone to select, okay, or influence your decision based on the ideas that you have in your head. Representative heuristics judge the likelihood of things in terms of how well they match the prototype. Okay, so that's something that can be a problem for decision making. Another one that influences is the availability of heuristics. So estimating the likelihood of events based on what is available currently in America. Okay, they polled a bunch of Americans and asked them what most Americans are in fear of. And most of them said in 2001 they were in fear of having a terrorist attack. However, the likelihood of a terrorist attack happening, okay, for death in America is a lot lower than other qualities of how somebody can die. So let's take a look at the chart. Okay, risks of death. Risk of death from various causes in the United States. Okay, most people will die in a car accident. Okay, 1 out of 9,300 will die in a suicide. Okay, 1 in 25,000 will die in a homicide incident. Okay, pedestrians in an accident, it's about 1 in 46,000. 1 in 94,000 could choke, and then a terrorist attack is 1 in 97,000 you'll die in a terrorist attack. So it's very limited opposed to an auto accident. But this was asked in 2001, and what was available in most people's mind at this point in time was September 11th. So they thought what was availability to have them make that decision was the terrorist attack. Okay. Other things that can impact decision making. Okay, we talked about heuristics, what's available and what's representative. Other things that can impact it is intuition. It's the automatic gut or feeling, like you just think you know. Okay, should I, let's say, date this person? I'm trying to make a decision. Well, a lot of you guys will go with your gut, like, yes, I think I need to do it. Or if you're answering a question on a quiz, like, I just have this gut instinct. That can definitely impact whether good or bad, whether you make a decision. Overconfidence, we've talked about this before with research. It's a tendency to overestimate the accuracy of our knowledge and our judgment. You know you're right, so you're going to select it, and you really know all this information, and that can skew whether or not how well you do. Okay, you may be more prone to finish a paper or project quicker if you know the information because of that overconfidence. Framing, it's the way in which they present an issue. That can significantly affect our decisions or our judgments. So the way that they advertise it or the way that they sell it. Okay, they tell you that it's a car and it has the best gas mileage, okay, out of all the cars. Well, what cars are they talking about? Are they talking about just their cars, or are they talking about every car? But if you hear something like that, that may be more prone to impact your decision. And then the last one is belief perseverance phenomenon. Okay, you just know that this is the right answer. So you know Santa Claus is real. And you've heard that there's no way that somebody can fly around the world in 24 hours and drop off presents at everybody. But you really have this gut instinct, this intuition that you know, and you've heard all the bad stuff about it. You're still going to go with this belief. Okay, so it's clinging to one's initial conceptions after the bias on which they were formed have been discredited. So sometimes students get two ideas confused: obstacles in problem solving and the decision making. Okay, confirmation bias is when you just want to support your own idea. Okay, you don't know the other ideas at this point in time, and you just want to support your own reasoning. Okay, belief perseverance phenomenon is you've been told the other person's point of view, okay, and you're still supporting your own. So I had some students getting those two confused last year. Confirmation bias, you're only supporting your own. You haven't heard why I told you that maybe you're supporting A, you want to go with A, you want to go with A. You haven't heard how I told you, well, here's the answer to B. Okay, belief perseverance would be like, I explained the answer to B. You're still clinging to A at this point in time. Okay? So kind of thinking about the big idea in this unit, the overarching theme was cognition. If you had to break it down into three big areas, it was mental images, problem solving, and decision making. Okay, so maybe we want to create a hierarchy where the big idea is cognition, and then you have three big ideas coming down: mental images, problem solving, and decision making. And then underneath mental images, we talked about what concepts and prototypes were. Under problem solving, we talked about all the different strategies, how creativity can impact problem solving, and the different obstacles somebody can kind of come into problems with when they're trying to make some solving problems. And then the last one is decision making. When you're finally making a decision, these are some of the 5 areas that can impact your decision. So I would probably, to wrap this up, draw a nice hierarchy of how all of this information lays out.